Welcome everybody. What I'm going to cover with you in this video is the 3 different methods for approaching Airbnb investing. There are 3 main business models in 2025. Now, I want you to pay close attention because Airbnb has changed significantly in the last 1 year. And what I want to focus on is what are the strategies that are working in 2025 so that when you start your Airbnb business, you are able to go out and make sure you have a very profitable business. So let's get right into it. Number 1 is purchasing a property. Okay? Pretty straightforward, and I want to get into the pros and cons and advantages of purchasing a property because then you are a rental property owner. Many advantages that come with that. So number 1, if you're purchasing a property, that's going to cost you the most capital up front, right? Because you need a down payment, which is typically, let's call it 10 to 20% down. And let's say your property is $500,000, just to keep the numbers simple. That means 10 to 20% down of $500,000, which is about 50K to 100K down. So not everyone has this type of capital. Now, there are creative finance strategies or seller financing strategies where you don't need necessarily 10 to 20% down. You can negotiate that with the seller. You can get private financing. You can do what is called subject to purchases where you take over an existing loan and you can at that point negotiate how much money down into the deal is required. You might not even need money down. So there's so many different strategies that you can go into, but this is typically what it's going to cost just from an acquisition standpoint on purchasing a property. So what are some of the advantages of purchasing a property? Well, when you own real estate, you get the equity gain, which is a great way to build wealth. So over time, your property is appreciating in value. So not only are you going to end up with cash flow with Airbnb, but you're also going to be able to take advantage of the equity gain of that property. The other thing is you can tap into your equity. So you can do a home equity line of credits, refinances, and that allows you to tap into the money almost like a piggy bank. You loan against whatever equity you have, and then that way you can continue to scale and get more and more properties. So these are great advantages. Now, one of the biggest advantages of real estate is the tax advantages. And specifically with Airbnbs and short-term rentals, there is the short-term rental loophole. You can accelerate depreciation. There's so many different things that you could take advantage of when it comes to taxes. And that's something that you can work on with your CPA or tax strategist. An amazing way to also retain your wealth and save on that tax bill that you owe at the end of the year. That's what makes purchasing very powerful. When you own real estate, it's one of the oldest and time-tried methods of building wealth. And that is why, in my opinion, eventually, if you don't start out by purchasing, you want to work your way to purchasing and owning real estate. So what's the second strategy? So the second strategy is rental arbitrage. All right. So what is rental arbitrage? Rental arbitrage is when you go find a property, let's say on Zillow, Realtor.com, and it's listed and you long-term rent it from the landlord and you convince the landlord to allow you to sublease that property. So you would get that 12, 18, 24-month lease, you list it on Airbnb, VRBO, Booking.com, and you collect the difference. So what are the startup costs required? Number 1, you don't need to go purchase this property. So you're already needing much less capital up front for this strategy. So that's a good pro. All you'll need is probably around, depending on how big your property is, my students have about a $10,000 to $12,000 average if they're fully furnishing the property from scratch. You can also find properties that are fully furnished, and that's a great hack if you want to keep your expenses really low for rental arbitrage. So again, you have to keep in mind though, you're selecting the right properties with the right amenities for this to be a success. And I have plenty of videos that teach you how to do that. You can click the link in the description. I have a free course where I go more into that type of research, what you're looking for in the different properties for them to be successful. So let's say you find that property, you get a 12-month lease and it's $3,000 per month. Okay, this is your monthly rent that you're going to be paying to have that property for however long you got the contract for. You're going to need about $10,000 to $12,000 one time in expenses for furnishing the property if it doesn't already come furnished. And then let's say on a monthly basis, you're able to bring in $8,000 on Airbnb or Vrbo or any of these platforms. So your income is, let's say, $8,000 per month. Your expense on rent is, let's say, $3,000. And then you're going to have your utilities, your landscaper or pool maintenance. If you have a pool, that's going to be another, let's say, $500 in utilities. And these are rough estimates, guys. These numbers will vary depending on how big your property is and where you are. And let's say another $500 in, the landscaping and all that, internet. So let's call it another $500. So rent and expenses, you're left with $4,000 in profit based on these estimates, of course, after your expenses. And now you can see how you can continue to build that and scale that out property by property by property. So your key pros here are much smaller expenses to start. You just have to furnish the property. And if you're really good at finding these properties, they might even come furnished. So then you save that, dollar amount. But let's say you need about roughly $10,000 to $12,000 on average to start and furnish the properties. So a great opportunity for you to build cash flow if you can't yet afford to purchase a property. And saving all this cash flow, and then, in my opinion, you want to go purchase a property so that you can get the tax advantages and the equity gain. So what are the cons of rental arbitrage? That is, you don't have the pros of owning the property. So property ownership is a great wealth building tool. You wouldn't be able to do that quite yet, but you're going to build great cash flow if you're doing this correctly. And that, in a nutshell, is rental arbitrage. And let's get right into the third strategy for Airbnb investing. Okay, so this is a great strategy called co-hosting. Now, this actually costs pretty much $0 to start. So if you don't have much capital, because in rental arbitrage, you're going to need to furnish the property and you're going to have the rent, of course. And in co-hosting, you don't need to rent the property. You don't need to furnish the property. All you're going to do is approach landlords that already have their properties listed online for rent, and you're going to offer a revenue sharing model. Now, what do I mean by that? Is manage the property for them and put it on Airbnb, and all you're going to do is collect your monthly fee from the gross revenue. Okay, so for example, let's say there's a house listed on Zillow for, let's call it $5,000 a month. Okay, one of the advantages, by the way, of this model is you can find really nice properties, very full of amenities, and you can immediately cash flow them because they're very desirable, right? If you put these properties on Airbnb, Vrbo, Booking, you are going to find, especially with the strategy that I teach my students, really top-notch properties. So they're not getting rented out right now, and you're offering them, hey, your property, let's say, is listed for $5K. I want to rent it out and relist it and manage it for you completely, and I'm going to give you those profits and just take my fee. Because right now, if you think about it, they're not rented. They don't have a long-term tenant. They're just sitting out there waiting to get some sort of tenant in there, and they're not getting a tenant. So what you're going to do is add massive value to them by offering them managing their property, listing it on these platforms, taking immaculate care of it, and you're really just setting up the system, which is having the cleaners, the landscapers, or whomever, which you can actually also negotiate with the landlord, and you're managing listing this property and taking care of it amongst all of the guests that come, and take your percentage. So let's say it's $5,000 that they're not getting. You're going to offer putting it on Airbnb, and let's say you're able to generate $10,000 a month on Airbnb or Vrbo or any of these platforms. You're going to take a 20% commission. Okay, so very win-win strategy and almost no risk to you. You don't own the property, you don't have a rent, you're not having to pay rent for that property. All you're doing is managing and taking care of that property, listing it on Airbnb, Vrbo, and collecting your fee. So that right there, just off of one property, and again, you can charge 15 to 30%, right? Anywhere from 15%, 20%, 20%, 30%. And let's say you're just going with 20%. Well, 20% of 10K, you're collecting $2,000 per month just managing communications and cleaning the property. Communications with the guests, cleaning the property. And you're also going to actually automate all of those functions. And that's what I teach my students how to do. So this is an amazing way to quickly generate cash flow without the risk and for $0 to start. And again, I always share with my mentees that the goal is really to have the cash flow and eventually invest and purchase real estate. You can generate an amazing cash flowing business just with this model. You're basically managing those properties for them, and you can accumulate and scale this model out very quickly as well. So in a nutshell, these are the 3 strategies for investing in Airbnb in 2025. Make sure that you understand your current situation, what exactly your goals are for you to start deciding which approach you want to jump into. If you want to learn exactly how to do this, click the link in my description. You can learn all of the strategies because this is just picking the strategies in Airbnb. And I have a free course that teaches you exactly how to start the Airbnb business from A to Z, which covers market research, selecting the property, actually listing the property, furnishing the property, photography, everything you can imagine, pricing, automation, scaling, all of that is in the link in the free course. Check out the rest of the YouTube channel. And for those of you that want to learn exactly how to do this and want my personal guidance one-on-one, click the link in the description and apply to work with me one-on-one and see if there's any availability. I work with a very small group of people per month so that they have my undivided attention. If that's something that you like, go for it. Be great.